I never planned to become the kind of man who waits in the dark for another man's mistakes to line up with his opportunity. I thought I'd die as what my first business card said I was. Caleb Hart, Senior Systems Engineer. Cameras, motion sensors, silent alarms. The polite language of compliance brochures. Truth is, I was good at making other people feel safe. It was the one virtue I thought I had nailed. If you asked my wife back then, she would have said I had two virtues. I provided and I planned. We had a tiny house with a green yard and licorice red mulch along the flower beds. There was a pool I thought I didn't deserve, a used smoker set on cinder blocks, and a nursery halfway painted. Saturday mornings, I ran the robot vacuum and sang along to old rock. I had no appetite for risk. My sin wasn't risk. It was pride. It takes one bad night to tilt the whole table. Mine started on a Thursday at O'Malley's where the napkins always smell like vinegar and the photo of the founder is crooked on purpose to get people talking. I ran into Bobby Dane, a friend I used to fish with, and mistook his mean streak for a sense of humor. He told me his ex-wife had a new boyfriend who walked like a substitute teacher and talked like a cop, and he wanted help getting into the guy's house. He said it like a joke, and I treated it like one. I told him how the locks our company sold shattered when you touched them with a magnet and how the south-facing windows fooled the exterior cameras at dusk. He pushed cash across the varnished wood. 500s wrapped in a rubber band. And I didn't push it back. A gift for a friend. I said to myself, a small betrayal of a big principle that no one would ever see. By Sunday morning, there was a dead man with his throat opened in a kitchen I had never stepped foot in. By Tuesday afternoon, there were cops at my door. And by the end of the month, a judge who had to appear stern because the courtroom was full. Bobby tried to throw me a rope. He spoke my name like it was a spell that might get him out of the box he'd built. It didn't help him. It didn't help me. The prosecutor said conspiracy. And my lawyer said we'll try. And the gavel said 5 years. Prison is a long hallway with no doors. Everybody tells you what to do and nobody tells you why. It is monotonous. And then once in a while, it is not. I learned the mechanics of keeping my head down. And I learned that a man can feel both sorry for himself and furious at the same time, which is a hard boil. I also learned that the world forgets you quickly. When I got out, the company where I'd drawn up wiring diagrams would not even let me in the lobby to see an old friend. My wife had discovered she had more peace without me than with me. And she was right to notice. The house was sold. The mulch bleached pale. I rented a one-bedroom apartment in a block where the elevator was always on the wrong floor. During the day, I made pizzas for kids who said extra ranch like it was a threat. At night, I watched a TV I'd bought from a pawn shop and imagined how different things would be if I had kept my mouth shut in a bar where nothing good happens after the second beer. I lasted 14 months before the invisible chokehold of pride and resentment made me do something stupid. I opened Craigslist and wrote an ad that was a lie told in a careful voice, discreet, punctual, no violence. The email account I created for it had a fake name and a password from a math class I barely passed in high school. I hit publish and expected a cop to knock. Instead, a private message arrived. A man wanted photographs removed from a private investigator's office. Compromising photographs. He wrote, like a man who never found a better word. I sat on the edge of my mattress and felt the old habit light up in my head. That crisp mental picture of what was behind walls. I went. I was terrified. I walked the neighborhood twice and counted the porch lights. Then I got inside in 10 minutes and out in 8. The investigator slept like a man who drank red wine from a coffee mug and trusted himself. The next morning, the client paid me cash. That night, for the first time since before prison, my brain quieted. In the quiet, something grew. It wasn't joy. It was competence. I didn't stop. I took small jobs I could learn from and never took the same kind twice in a row. I stayed away from houses with children's toys out front and from fences with political signs because those households tend to have nervous dogs and calling lists. I bought an old Chevy Impala with a trunk you could open with a butter knife and taped my flashlight so it wouldn't rattle. Eventually, I stopped posting ads. People came to me through people who didn't use last names. I wasn't a criminal. I told myself. I was an engineer under different management. I kept a .357 tucked into an inside-the-waistband holster I'd bought from a retired cop who thought I was a plumber. I hated the weight of it and the way it pressed a cold half-moon into my hip bone when I sat. I told myself I would never need it. Most nights. I didn't. The night that changed everything arrived folded in a bright red envelope that had no stamp and no addressee. Only a gold symbol pressed into the paper. It was a Sigma, the kind a fraternity house would paint on a plywood sign. The envelope was in my mailbox between a grocery flyer offering 3 avocados for $1 and a magazine about gadgets I could not afford. Inside the red paper was a neat stack of cash. 50 crisp hundreds under a brittle rubber band. And a small card with sober serif type. To the man who dwells in the shadows. House at 9596, Queenwood Avenue. Retrieve silver idol. Master bedroom. 2nd floor. Audi Q5 will be waiting in the driveway at 1 a.m. Tonight. 1% reward enclosed. 1% of what? I wondered. If this was 1%, then the total was 5 million. I turned the card over like there might be math on the back. Just white. I felt the room tilt. I felt a boyish flattery I should have been ashamed of. How did they know where I lived? How did they know what I did? What did they do to other men who said no? Before the clock in my kitchen read midnight, I had my satchel packed, lockpicks, a short crowbar, a pliable strip saw, a carpenter's hammer, a butane torch I almost never used because fire brings attention, pliers wrapped with tape. I pulled a black ski mask over my head and rolled it back like a beanie because it was cold, and my breath made a little cloud when I crossed the lot to the Impala. Queenwood was the kind of street built in the years when developers thought a slant in the roofline could make a home feel different from the one next to it. I parked around the corner and cut across 2 lawns to shorten the line between me and the job. The moon was pale, and the wind bit like metal. I found 9596 on a square column beside a porch where the railings were loose. And I noticed immediately something that did not add up, a pale glow leaking from the master bedroom window. Not yellow like a lamp, but as if someone had strapped an old TV to the ceiling. The kitchen window popped with less effort than it deserved. I eased inside and felt my shoes slide on a film of ketchup and cooking oil. And a stink hit me I could not place, socks left in a gym bag. Maybe. And beer warm as a body. The place had been turned over by someone who lived there. A couch bloomed stuffing. An empty aquarium leaned against a wall like a television in rehab. I moved toward the stairs, grateful for the crown molding I could brush with my knuckles in the dark. That's when I heard the voice. Linda, I don't know what's going on. I come home, and it's like a party happened. But he's just sitting there staring at the wall. A woman in a half-whisper. Not crying. Not yet. The bathroom door was cracked just enough to show a black oblong that had to be the mirror. No, I can't get into his room. He moved the TV up there. He locks it. Don't say call the cops. Don't. He'll change. I know he will. I thought of my wife and the last kind lie she told me across a visiting room table. You'll find your way. The woman's voice dissolved into breath. I took the stairs one at a time, avoiding the squeakers a carpenter had marked with a wax crayon a lifetime ago. At the top, I heard it, the television static the window had promised. A fat band hiss that massaged the air into something unclean. The door to the master was a cheap replacement with a shiny keyhole on the outside. I picked it with a tension wrench and a rake and let myself into a scene that settled on my skin like grit. The only light came from a cathode box on a second-hand desk. A screen full of snow that lit the room as if someone had hung the moon by a fraying string. A man sat in a wheeled chair with his back to me. Shoulders lifted like a shrug, he could not finish. On the desk beside the TV were a rubber horse mask with nostrils flared and an electric circular saw with no blade guard. The bed looked like a fight had happened in it, and nobody won. The carpet was a landfill of magazines. Plastic cups. Pizza crusts. Receipts wet with what my mind insisted was water. On the wall facing me, dozens of printer paper sheets tacked in crooked rows, each smeared with words written in a substance too dark and too clotted to be ink. The letters stuttered like a hand that could not calm itself. Kill her. She must die. There were childish drawings. Stick figures with just enough curve in the hair of one to tell you she was a woman, and arrows telling a story I did not read. The idol was where the card said it would be, a silver sculpture of a woman about 8 inches high, classical in posture, arms lifted as if she balanced something invisible. It looked expensive and also wrong, as if someone had scrubbed a relic and peeled off whatever spell kept it quiet. I sat on my haunches behind the bed and slid it into my satchel and listened to my heart go from hammer to metronome. I should have left through the same window I had entered. I could have turned the static into a lullaby of luck. But the man in the chair spoke, and his voice tightened something inside me I didn't know I still had. "He's been different lately," he said, the exact cadence and wording the woman had used. "Just sitting there. Violent. Left a mark on the back of my neck." He stood. He reached for the horse mask and pulled it over his head, the rubber catching in his hair and then snapping down. With his other hand, he grabbed the saw by its handle and a cord that looped off the desk like a tail. He never turned to look at me. He walked out of the room like a wind-up toy set on a track. I went to the window, drew the blinds with one finger, and looked down. There it was, a black Audi Q5 idling in the driveway. One back door open like a mouth. The sunroof whirred back, and a bald man in a dark coat lifted his wrist and tapped the face of a watch without numbers. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He sank back into the car, and the roof closed like a lid. In the bathroom downstairs, a switch smacked plastic and a motor screamed. The first scream that followed the saw was thin and high, an instrument warming up. The second was body deep. It filled the stairwell and slammed into my chest. I drew the gun I told myself I would never use. The metal felt heavier than the money I had ever earned. My hand shook. I told it to stop. It didn't. At the bathroom door, the scene held its own lights and shadows. The linoleum had been pried from the corners and left like a peeled sticker. The mirror was cracked the way a windshield cracks when a small stone hits the wrong place. The woman lay in pieces the way a nightmare arranges itself into symbols that do not feel like symbols until the morning. The saw had already gone quiet. The man in the horse mask stood with his back to me, shoulders pumping like he had sprinted but hadn't moved. I should have gone. I should have set the house on fire from the sidewalk and let the sirens come for what they could not fix. Instead, I lifted the revolver with one hand because the other clutched the bag with the idol in it. And I pulled the trigger. The shot ripped the room and scared my own finger. A spray of porcelain chipped from the tub. My wrist screamed. The bullet did not find meat. The horse head turned. The big molded eyes stared without seeing. And yet what came through them felt like recognition. The mask tilted lower, down toward the satchel. The man made a sound like a kettle starting to boil. He raised the saw again. I moved because the old body will make a decision when the new mind can't. He lunged. The spitting blade kissed my forearm and drew a line that felt like someone dragging a key along the door of a car I had borrowed. Hot. Stupid. Deep. I dropped the gun because the nerve that held it loosened. I grabbed the hammer instead, the claw end forward, and snapped myself into an earlier version of me, the one that believed in tools more than choices. I hooked my left arm around his neck and felt the rubber of the mask against my bicep and the wet under it. Sweat or something else. I brought the hammer down and felt the world change tone. The first hit sunk an inch into latex. The second found skull. After that, you learn the difference between bone and every other material in the universe. It is a bad lesson to understand and impossible to forget. When he stopped moving, the engine of the saw wound down on its own. A patient giving up. Silence came like a moral. I put a hand on the edge of the sink and gagged, and then lost what I had eaten. My arm bled along my shirt and down into my waistband. I took a half second to hate myself for everything and then left. The Audi's door was still open. The warm air inside felt like a different season. The man in the back seat had pale, milky eyes a doctor would have called cataracts. He turned his head toward me in an unerringly accurate way, as if he could see what mattered and didn't need the rest. "The idol," he said, in a British accent that felt borrowed from a polite throat. "Give it here, Mr. Hart." I handed it over. He took it in a hand tattooed with the same sigma that was on the envelope. He opened a small box made of something so red it made me think of the inside of a mouth. The box was transparent and faceted like a gemstone, and the hinges were invisible. He set the idol inside, and the box made a delicate click, the sound of something being shut up for a long time. "You're hurt," he said, not unkindly. He produced a roll of gauze and a flask. He poured the liquor over the gash along my forearm, and the pain flashed me white. He wrapped the arm tight enough that I could feel the beat of my heart against the cotton. "It is not a slight thing," he said, "to stand between a hunger and its dinner. Do not underestimate what you did tonight." He nodded toward the driver, who eased the car into reverse, then down the street, then around two corners as if he were practicing a dance. The bald man laid a leather briefcase across my knees and popped it open with his thumb. Money like I hadn't seen. 19 stacks, each 5 high, some still smelling like the machine that cut them. 49,500, he said. "The first 5 we supplied in good faith. You handled your part. We will handle the rest." "The rest," I said, because I wanted him to name it. "The mess," he said, not looking away. "And the story. There are men whose job is to adjust the story so that the living can remain comfortable. They are very good at their job. The address of your apartment remains your address. I suggest you rest there for some days. Make no calls to newspapers, and accept that you have done a hard thing for which the universe has no receipt." We pulled into my lot. My Impala sat under a sodium lamp the color of a bruise. The driver waited with the patience of a doctor about to tell you news he has told 1,000 times. The bald man nudged the case closer to me. "You made a choice out of conscience," he said, "and it cost you blood. The idol is not a toy. In the wrong hands, it tunes men like guitars until they can only play one song. You pulled the plug on one song tonight. It was an ugly song. You knew what was in that house." I said. "I knew enough," he said. "Enough to keep you alive." "Why me?" "Because you are precise," he said, "and because you are breakable in the right ways. A blunt man would have died. A kind man would have died. A ruthless man would have left the woman to it, and we would have lost the idol. You are a blend. Useful blends are rare." "Who are you?" I said, because even an idiot wants a name to put on the box he keeps locked inside. "Mr. Winters will do," he said, as if I had just met him at a clubhouse. I stepped out of the Audi with money under my arm and my own blood on my hip, and a sense that whatever I used to understand had been a version of the truth the way children's books are versions of novels. I slept that night for 12 hours as if someone had unplugged me. The next morning the news reported a domestic disturbance 3 miles from Queenwood and no names. No photographs. No neighbors describing a quiet man who kept to himself. I watched for relapses of the truth and saw none. My arm throbbed. I counted the money twice because counting the wrong number would have felt like a sin. I bought a better apartment in a building where the elevator doors tried their best. I did not buy a new car. I liked the trunk of the old one. I replaced the Impala's seats. I kept working, because working was the only thing that felt like a plan. I found I had less trouble ignoring the sounds of other people suffering after that night. I don't say that with pride. It is simply what happened. A few months later, I crawled along a ventilation run above a strip club office and watched a boss with a jitter in his jaw slap a dancer who was late with her cut. I put my hand on my pistol and then took it off because the image that came into my head was the woman in the bathroom and the saw and the way the room went quiet. I told myself I was not the police. I told myself I was not a hero. I told myself the idol had not turned me into something new, only revealed what I had the blueprints for all along. I did not see Mr. Winters again, not in a way you could photograph, but I saw the Sigma twice. Once on a signet ring worn by a man who sat at a city council meeting and said nothing. Once burned into the corner of a paper left on a bus stop bench. So faint I could have convinced myself I imagined it. Both times I kept walking. When the mail clattered into the slot, I flinched for months, certain that red paper would come again. When it didn't, I felt both abandoned and relieved. The way you feel when a doctor says, "We'll just monitor it." I became the cold man I used to promise I'd never be. I told myself it was a practical choice, like switching to decaf. But there were nights when the television static rose up from the street like fog, and I turned my head, and saw a horse's eyes that were not eyes. I dreamed of a silver woman inside a red box and the way the lid clicked. You want a satisfying ending? I can give you one part of it. The men who make the story learned my name, but let it stay where it was. The money lasted long enough to make new habits. No police knocked on the door. No reporter called at dinner time. The wound on my arm healed into a rope of scar that is more straight than jagged because the blade caught me clean. When I run my thumb along it, I feel not pain but texture. The kind of texture you can find on everything once you've been in a room where the air is wrong. The other part of the ending is this. I know now that violence is a language. It is as common and dumb as a swear word and as precise as a surgeon's scalpel, depending on who speaks it. The night at Queenwood taught me that there are rooms in this country where a woman tells a friend she is going to be okay, and there are men building altars to the opposite. It taught me that some people carry boxes you can't open without letting the bad thing out, and some people open them anyway because they think they deserve to look. I don't claim heroism. I don't make a virtue of what I did with the hammer. I am not interested in making it small. Either. I did what I did, and I have to live in the house that built. If you've made it this far, I'd like you to do something most stories don't ask. Argue with me. Tell me in the comments if you think I should have walked away. Tell me if you believe violence solves nothing, or if you've seen a moment when the ugly thing stopped a worse thing. Tell me what you think about the way we decide who deserves help and who we ignore, and whether the quiet men with symbols on their rings are the villains or just the janitors of our collective mess. Take a stand. Say what you believe about what fairness looks like when the room is already on fire. I'll read it. I might not answer, but I'll read every word.